were very much, we were the Antifa before that name became popular. We're celebrating both Memorial Day and D-Day. Today is D-Day. D-Day anniversary. And those of you that went to school and learned about that stuff or watched the History Channel, and I'm a History Channel buff, you know that that was a very important day in our history, in which we, if it hadn't been successful, we would have probably had to try again next year. And Hitler, getting mixed up, Hitler was working on secret weapons, and they were available shortly before we got to the place where they were being ready to be sent to at least the V-2 rocket, I think it's called. It's a more powerful one. And about England was taking the brunt of Hitler's and his secret weapons were being developed. So it's a good thing we got onto the beach in Normandy and were able to wrap up the war by April of war in Europe by April of 1945. So, without more ado, this poem is a very solemn poem. As you know, sometimes I come up with comedy. Last time I made a joke about me being able to replace Colbert. If that had happened, I wouldn't be here. So you're all the benefit. You're all the benefit of the fact that that I was not picked. They haven't actually got a successor to Colbert. They have a program that was in the 11:30 time slot they switched. Okay, as usual, Memorial Day and D-Day are close together. Significant, this year like every other year, significant are both representing the effects of whether this country was to survive, at least as a moral structure. And it is good for us to often ponder the conjecture that freedom and morality would endure in this nation. Yes, both have been threatened with destruction. The Civil War brought us so close to extinction of a union whose early adoption was a vital notion that had to be subject to considerable thought. Our founders decided independence should be fought by banding together out of at least necessity, and thus they made some quite glorious history. Any scholar who studied the 1776 revolution, the odds were so against a victorious resolution that we can, that it was said at the time as the world upside down, the United States by the world given renown. So that some people at the time said that a providence, some benevolent force, willed the country's existence. To those who died in preserving the Union War, those that we honor on Memorial Day was that was set up for. And if that war was not originally proposed to free the slaves, still Providence knows that moral leader Abe Lincoln set the gears in motion to bring to reality that now self-evident supposition that freedom was a right of all human beings. And that achievement was not just one of those things. In other words, it was important. And be in awe that on the beaches of D-Day, men with 50-pound packs and the courage of giants took on an army of strength and evil immense. At the danger of being hit by a bullet or a mine, surely they were infused with a gallantry divine. The decision of Eisenhower, who seized the opportunity almost like a miracle, a short break in the weather's severity. Yes, with Monty's persuasion that we just couldn't further delay, and our luck held. If it hadn't been for the success of D-Day, how many uncertainties might have made events play towards Nazi victory and a long reign of their terror. We should ponder deeply whenever feeling despair and devote ourselves to our Republic's sacred care. How lucky our Navy was in that harbor of Hawaii. The carriers were not present, so the Japanese victory was not complete, was even perhaps convenient, so our leadership decided carriers were more efficient. And what was that blessed us on the Battle of Midway when one scout pilot extended his mission that day to see by chance one Japanese ship almost hidden by a cloud that pointed to their task force. So our pilots could be proud, our squadrons at just the right time frame. To hit them the hardest, was that just the luck of the game? And even to consider some of our follies, if we remember the paranoid times, the 50s and 60s, Cold War dangers due to nuclear tomfooleries. A nuclear bomb fell in North Carolina by accident. Similar things had occurred, but not anything with this precedent. The bomb tripped the arming safeguards, 3 of the 4. Only by such a slender margin were we spared the horror of nearly one whole state blown into oblivion. Most of the people in North Carolina would not now be living. Or even more enormous, in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, we must admit our deep obligation to one we might have said was a nemesis. At least one Russian officer touched by humanity refused to let us be destroyed by stupidity. He stood firm after our destroyer had sent a depth charge nearby his submarine, and then he made a decision so large not to retaliate. His sub had nuclear torpedoes. He restrained himself. What a hero. And so history goes. Even in our stupidity, perhaps some providence protects our special nation with some protection immense. One more Cold War event of monumental significance to which we all owe our very existence. Colonel Stanislav Petrov of the Soviet military, at his job at Strategic Command, was charged to be wary. Some alarms on the main stream about U.S. missiles approaching. He was supposed to, of course, raise the alarm. The nukes are encroaching. Others in the room were demanding he make that call. He refrained, and needless to say, most of humanity, if not all, are grateful for his humanity as well as his calm. It later turned out to be a false alarm. Was it a fluke or was it luck? It was Stanislav that day. Or are these events something more important? And we say, we are trying to find our way through a time of peril, and a large part of our country seems to support evil. I call on all good people to take heart in these times, while so many are rewarded for the most enormous crimes. I do not know if there is anything in the universe above that cares anything special about the country we love, but I hope everyone can about this situation reflect, and always do their best to resist and reject the forces that are so against what is good for our country, and do the best you can to preserve our posterity. As we approach the 250th anniversary, continue and enlarge the resurgency of protests and efforts to make sure the elections are fair, and that you make your best patriotic selections. And if you do what you can during this time of travail, surely Providence will not allow those efforts to fail. You do not have to storm the beaches of Normandy, but you do need to follow the angels of your humanity. Not everyone can be an Alex Preddy or Renee Good, but everyone can call on their sense of brotherhood. And as with those two, and for others imprisoned or hurt, it will require in the elections a pretty large spurt. Make this our D time, the time of decision, as we hope to improve our blessed country's condition. As we approach the 250th with solemn determination, I hope you'd find insights from this humble rendition.
Thank you.